it's J5Lover, your #1 Jackson 5 and Michael Jackson fan, and I'm here to talk to you today about the Jackson 5 compared with the Osmonds. Who was better? Well, before I get started with that, I'd like to talk to you about this day in Jackson 5 history. Well, this day in Jackson 5 history, August 4th, 1972, the Michael Jackson Ben album was released. This was his second studio album with Motown Records as a solo artist. And this was the original cover with all the mice like running around at the bottom. Apparently, this cover scared a lot of kids, so they withdrew it and brought out this cover, which most people know and love. I actually really prefer this cover too. The original cover was put there because of the film that the song went along with as a soundtrack. Anyway, kind of funny that scared children. I would have never thought that. Getting back to my discussion, who was better? The Osmonds, the Jackson 5. The Osmonds, the Jackson 5. Okay, so let's start with the Osmonds. They started out on the Andy Williams Show. It was just 4 brothers originally in 1962, and Donnie joined in 1963. They starred a lot on the Andy Williams Show from 1962 to 1969, and their sound was kind of like that of a barbershop quartet. Very kind of vaudeville, kind of old school sound. In November of 1970, they came out with this album, their first album, The Osmonds. And on this album, they had a song that became a #1 hit called One Bad Apple. It hit #1 in February of 1971. Funny enough, this song was first presented to the Jackson 5. Well, Berry Gordy turned down the song because Motown had their own team of writers, and he didn't want any outside writers. So, when the Osmonds got a hold of the song, they kind of sang it in a very Jackson 5-esque way, as you'll see right here.
I've been noticing you, baby, for a long, long time. I'm not ashamed to tell the world that you really messed up my mind. Girl, to me, you're like a dream come true. I'd rather hurt myself than to ever hurt you. One bad apple don't spoil the whole bunch, girl. Oh, give it one more try before you give up on love, girl.
Now, to me, when I hear that song, even though I think the Osmonds did a good job singing the song, it's not as soulful as what the Jackson 5 would have done if they had gotten a hold of the song. I really would have loved actually to have heard a version of the Jackson 5 doing that song. I think they would have blew the Osmonds out of the water, personally. And that song actually were the Osmonds' only #1 hit. The Osmonds had, other songs that kind of had a soulful kind of Jackson 5-esque sound, like Yo-Yo, Double Lovin', and even on that same first album, they had a song called Motown Special, which is kind of like an homage to certain songs and artists from Motown Records. So they were definitely tipping their hat off not only to the Jackson 5, but to Motown in general. In 1970, the Jackson 5 had 4 #1 hits. Throughout their career, the Osmonds would actually have 9 top 40 hits, while the Jackson 5 going into the Jacksons would have 11 top 40 hits, as well as 11 top 10 hits. Enough, Michael Jackson did say to Donny Osmond once, you're probably the only person in the whole world who can truly understand my life, which totally makes sense. I mean, they both came from a family of 9. They both came from religious families. The Osmonds were Mormons. The Jackson 5 were Jehovah's Witnesses. Their lives were almost identical at the same time period, which is so crazy and unique. They were both huge teen idols in the 1970s. The Jackson 5 had their own Saturday morning cartoon in 1971. The Osmonds had their own Saturday morning cartoon in 1972 by the same company, Rankin and Bass. They each had a little brother that joined the group, a 6th member, around 1972. And in 1976, both groups decided to have a variety show. The funny part is I feel like from that point, they kind of divert because ultimately, the variety show turned Donny Osmond's career more into a career with his sister, Marie Osmond, while Jacksons didn't continue to have a variety show. Therefore, they were able to pursue their record career more. So I feel like the variety show ended the group The Osmonds, and the variety show didn't end the Jacksons group. In fact, like I said, they put a stop to it in order to continue their music and to continue performing. So it really only helped their record sales not to continue a variety show. And the funny thing is both groups contain, young men who are attractive, who are talented, who are clean cut. I feel like there was only one big difference, and that was the Jackson 5 were black. Jackson 5 were really the first group of black teen idols to be successful the way that they were. They weren't just mildly successful, they had a slew of hits, and they weren't just successful in the United States, they were successful all over the world. No other group of black teen idols had ever been that successful beforehand. In fact, I really wouldn't say that other musical black groups were even considered teen idols before the Jackson 5 came along. I feel like a lot of the mainstream media and mainstream publications didn't really know how to handle that, didn't know what to do with the Jackson 5, which is why a lot of times Motown had to step in. Motown, made the Jackson 5's first magazine featuring them on the cover, TCB. And also Right On magazine publication featured the Jackson 5 for a good year and a half, 2 years. And I feel like it wasn't until after that, finally, the Jackson 5 had started to be featured in Teen and 16 and Spec magazines. Also, the Osmonds had an array of memorabilia that I feel the Jackson 5 didn't have. They had pillowcases and their mother's recipe book that was available. Not that the Jackson 5 didn't have collectible pieces. I just feel like they could have been marketed more. But once again, they were the first real black teen idol group to ever. Personally, I wish they would have came out with Jackson 5 dolls or Jackson 5 lunchbox. There's an Osmond lunchbox. There's no Jackson 5 lunchbox, which I find insane. I feel like when you think about it, the Jackson 5 had a more lasting power than the Osmonds. Not only was their career longer, as not only the Jackson 5, which turned into the Jacksons, which they still perform to this day, but even the music had a longer lasting power. I mean, if you turn on the radio today, you're more likely to hear an old Jackson 5 hit before you would ever hear an old Osmond song or hit of any kind. And even recently, Michael Jackson, the Jacksons, the Jackson 5 now have their own Sirius XM station. You don't hear that about the Osmonds at all. And I feel like the beginning of the Osmonds' mainstream career started with them sort of emulating the Jackson 5. To me, ultimately, and I'm sure there are many Osmond fans out there who would contest, I think the Jackson 5 were a better group. I think they were better dancers. I think they sounded more soulful. I think they had more #1 hits. I think that they just had a quality that was kind of missing in the Osmonds. And I absolutely love the Osmonds. Actually, I like listening to them. I have several of their records, but I just don't think it's quite the same as the Jackson 5. But ultimately, you compare the solo career of Donny Osmond, who had mild success, versus the solo career of Michael Jackson, who became a worldwide superstar. There's really no comparison on who made a bigger mark in the world and who had more success. Now that kind of concludes my Jackson 5 versus the Osmonds debate. Tell me what you think down in the comments. Do you think the Jackson 5 are better, the Osmonds, or maybe you have a favorite Osmond song, a favorite Jackson 5 song, or you were around in the early 70s and remember hearing, One Bad Apple for the first time. What are your thoughts? Let me know down in the comments below. I'll see you guys next time.